The MiG-21SMT flies out in War Thunder. Let's see what it's got. The MiG-21, which first entered service at the start of the 1960s, set the aviation world into a frenzy of interest. This new fighter was small, fast, agile, and importantly, it was cheap. The Soviets put the MiG-21 into mass production not only for themselves, but for their allies, and the jet went on to become the most widely produced combat aircraft of the Cold War era. It should come as no surprise that it was produced in dozens of versions over the years. The MiG-21SM, introduced in 1969, continued from the earlier S version with modernized engine components, a GSH-23 cannon, tweaks to its radar and IFF systems, and new radio navigation equipment. However, the biggest critical weakness of the MiG-21 remained. The thing just didn't have any range. A running joke in the Soviet Air Force was that the MiG-21 had to turn back for landing immediately after finishing its initial climb out after takeoff, and in the end, this limitation forced early MiG-21s into a role as a point defense fighter. The SMT upgrade in 1971 was an attempt to remedy this problem. This was a relatively late model of the plane, considered part of the third generation of MiG-21s, and it featured a greatly enlarged fuselage spine behind the cockpit. This allowed for a significant amount of additional fuel to be carried internally, which was popular with the generals, but the spine reduced visibility for the pilot, something that wasn't really great to begin with, so that wasn't very popular with the pilots themselves. Even with the extra weight, the SMT still retained the excellent performance of earlier versions. However, the center of gravity was a little off and required pilots to relearn the flight envelope, which, again, they really didn't like. The SMT also featured most of the weapon system upgrades that had found their way into the MiG-21 family during the late 1960s. While generally successful at providing longer range, it was superseded by the MiG-21 Beasts fairly quickly and was only in production for a very short time. What we're looking at in War Thunder is the MiG-21SMT. This is a jet fighter in rank 7 of the Soviet tech tree with a battle rating of 10.3. This jet gets a basic ballistics computer providing a CCIP for unguided rockets and its cannon, but not for bombs. It also gets the Sapphire 21 radar set. This radar has a bit of a weird reputation, but it's still quite useful, and it features ACM boresight targeting along with basic IFF functionality. For loadouts, the jet can take air-to-air missiles along with bombs and rockets, but it's only got 4 pylons, so the overall weapon load remains pretty light, despite having a good range of options to choose from. For air-to-air missiles, it gets both versions of the basic R3, the rear aspect caged seeker infrared version, and the semi-active radar version. These missiles have pretty low performance, with only 10 Gs of pull and a fairly limited effective range, but the R3R is the only all-aspect weapon that the MiG-21SMT gets. The upgraded missile is the R60. This is another rear aspect infrared missile, but it features a larger aperture which makes locking a target easier, and it supports radar slaving. It has 30 Gs of pull, but very limited range, best used within like 2 kilometers, and it loves to chase flares, so you have to be pretty careful with your shots. One thing the MiG-21SMT really has going for it is some really strong flight performance. This jet accelerates well, has a good rate of climb, and it has reasonably high maximum speed of over 2,000 kilometers an hour. However, there are some drawbacks to know about. Being a delta wing plane, this jet tends to bleed off energy fairly easily in high angle of attack turns. The upside is that it's capable of high angle of attack turns, but you're gonna dump a lot of airspeed if you pull into one. The strong engine thrust can help mitigate this, but if you keep at it long enough, you'll find this plane in a slow crawl turn with almost no energy left, which is never a good spot to be in. Another caveat is to remember that the jet's turn performance and agility is much better at lower altitudes. The wing design provides some amazing high-altitude top speed, but for agility, it's much more effective down low in denser air. This might be confusing to someone new to the MiG-21 family, as it seems like this jet is an excellent dogfighter down on the deck, and it is, but it seems like it struggles to turn up at like 7,000 or 8,000 meters, which it does. So just keep it in the back of your mind that for the best maneuverability and dogfighting results, you want to be down at much lower altitude. Something else that ends up making a difference: fuel. The SMT has a meaningfully larger fuel load than other and earlier versions of the MiG-21, so you can just fly this thing on afterburner basically for an entire match if you want to. This ends up being pretty significant, as even on larger maps, keeping your speed up and maintaining your plane's energy state can help basically every area of the plane's performance, and you won't have to worry about it because of the enhanced fuel load. Just remember though, that the controls do lock up at crazy high speeds, but the air brake can help with that if you run into trouble. When you take the MiG-21SMT out in air battles, you get the opportunity for some really exciting gameplay. This plane, like other MiG-21s, is an outstanding dogfighter, but unlike the MiG-21 F-13, it gets 4 better missiles, along with a far more useful radar set and a better gun. These give the SMT really solid performance with interception tactics as well, which is something the more basic MiG-21 jets aren't always good at in War Thunder. Taking an R3R up to high altitude can provide a chance for a head-on missile shot against somebody else who's climbing up for boom and zoom stuff, and its R60s are significantly better than the R3S at close-range dogfighting, so really the SMT can perform air combat roles regardless of what tactics you want to focus on. My personally preferred loadout is 1 R3R and 3 R60s. Now, the good news is, this jet is in a position in the tech tree where you don't get anywhere near as much BVR missile spam during the opening phase of a match, which makes it much easier to actually get in for close-up dogfights, and it also makes it a lot safer if you need to disengage or if you want to climb and start off at high altitude yourself at the start of a match. Generally speaking though, this jet is gonna do its best air combat work during up-close, in-close, brawling dogfights down below 3,000 meters. Now in terms of ground attack, the MiG-21 SMT gets a CCIP for its rockets, but it's limited by its light overall quantity of weapons. The bombs just don't pack enough punch to do base grinding or anything, and you don't get the CCIP for them, so in my opinion, the best option is to take the 2 larger rocket pods on the inboard pylons and a pair of missiles on the outboard. With the inboard rocket pods and a pair of missiles, this gives you the flexibility and enough ammo to scoot around taking out AI ground units or providing reasonably credible close air support. The rockets don't hit as hard as the bombs, obviously, but you get enough of them in quantity to compensate. And the S5K rocket pods feel surprisingly accurate with this jet, and it's really not too hard to score hits with the CCIP. Visually, opinions will vary here. Some people won't like the big spine, but personally, I think it's still a great looking version of the MiG-21. You get a whole bunch of options for custom paint jobs too, with a good selection of different patterns and colors, including a cool esports skin. Overall, I think it's got great visuals. Landing is broadly similar to other MiG-21 series jets. Your landing speed is often going to be kinda fast, but you can set this thing down at around 220 kilometers an hour with a little practice. It gets an air brake, and you can drop gear and flaps safely well over 400, so even if you come in pretty hot, it really shouldn't be a big problem. The cockpit has some quirks. The radar scope is lower than I personally prefer, but the visibility is still surprisingly good in basically every direction except straight backwards. The instruments are clear and simple, but again, some of the important ones are much lower in the cockpit than I personally prefer. Overall though, it's mostly okay to fly in VR. To close out on the MiG-21 SMT. This jet has excellent dogfight performance. It's reasonably fast. It's surprisingly good at close air support. It's got plenty of fuel, and it's positioned very well in the matchmaker as of mid-2023. However, its cannon can be difficult to aim against air targets, its radar doesn't have any advanced modes, and its overall weapon load is a little light. The final verdict on the MiG-21SMT is that as of mid-2023, this is one of the most effective dogfighters in its respective BR bracket, and it's a huge upgrade from earlier Soviet tech tree fighters. If you're researching towards this jet, it's worth it. As always, thanks for watching.